What is going on, everybody? I am Jamie Shaw, joined here by my co-host on The Breakdown, Scott Spinelli. Scott, how's it going today?
Great, Jamie. How are you today, buddy?
Man, things are good down this way. Got a little bit of a tropical depression coming through Raleigh, North Carolina today, but that can't keep us away from The Breakdown.
Well, again, thanks to Dana Barros, basketball club, Travis, Stephanie, Mike. Busy day here at Dana Barros where a lot of AAU games going on. So I got one eye watching some high school kids, some prospects out here as we're doing the podcast. But thanks again for them allowing us to produce and film our show here.
I'm super excited about today's episode. We're going to go through the breakdown with Notre Dame. We're going to take a different look at it entering this basketball season. We're going to actually do a deep dive into Notre Dame, the program. We're going to take a look at the personnel, the X's and O's. We're going to break down their offensive identity, their defensive identity. And I can't think of a better person to be doing this with than, former head coach, 10-year, 20-year assistant coach, been through a lot of trials and everything in the ACC with you, Scott.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Before we jump into it, though, we already got into it a little bit. Let's introduce ourselves. My name is Jamie Shaw, National Recruiting Analyst at Rivals.com. I'm also the author of one of the largest scouting services in the country, the ABC Scouting Report. That is me, Scott Spinelli. Why don't you tell them about you?
So after graduating college, Jamie, I decided to get into coaching, and I've had an opportunity to coach at every level of basketball. As a younger coach, I was a prep school coach for 6 years at two different programs, helped start the Winchendon School program, their basketball program. We put out a lot of, Division I guys there, and it really had a lot of success. And then I ventured into the college game, been at every level of Division I, as well as some minor league, some NBA stuff along the way. And I'm really blessed and fortunate to be in a position, where I've had a lot of great experience, worked for a lot of great coaches along the way, and met a lot of wonderful people. So again, Jamie, you're one of those wonderful people that I had a chance to connect with through this process.
Well, I tell you what, I've known you for the last 8 or 9 years, known you through the recruiting process and all that type of stuff. Doing this podcast with you, this is our third installment. I didn't realize just how really, really brilliant of a basketball mind that you were. You're teaching me things as we go through this stuff with your expertise in the X's and O's. Obviously, you had to coach against these guys. You were a head coach against Mike Bray and all that type of stuff as well as we jump into this. But leading into our third installment here with Notre Dame, we're going to go through with you on the breakdown. As we said before, we're going to break down their personnel. We're going to go through the X's and O's, their offensive, defensive identity of what Mike Bray is trying to do. Mike Bray has a career 448 and to 248 record at Notre Dame. His 64% win percentage has gotten him in 12 NCAA tournament appearances. As we mentioned before, as a coach who's been an assistant and scouted against him, as a coach who's been a head coach against him, what is it about Mike Bray that makes his teams, makes his program so special?
Well, first of all, Jamie, it starts with his recruiting. He recruits guys who, again, a great system fits to how he wants to play. And with that, he loves players who can all pass, dribble, and shoot. So with the game today being that of a game that three-point line is really a weapon, Coach Bray has been able to recruit to that system, and he has a lot of kids, year in and year out that are three-point weapons and can really shoot the basketball. Over the years, watching his teams, competing against them on the opposition, bench, had a chance to really kind of, watch his program and how he does things. And, the offensive side of the basketball as it relates to teaching his guys the read and reaction, how to play with great spacing, instilling incredible confidence in his players. The one thing about Coach Bray, he never gets too high or low. And Jamie, there's something to be said in the ACC, Division I basketball as a coach, having that quality, his players feed off that. So whether it's a great win that they've had or whether it's a tough loss, he's a guy as a head coach that really, gives his players, the not too high, not too low motto. And it really, really carries on game in and game out, year in and year out for their team.
So understanding that y'all were coaches, y'all were opponents, y'all were trying to beat each other and everything. I know you're an incredibly detail-oriented person, Scott. You've got to have a good story about Mike Brady that kind of depicts what type of person and coach that he is.
Jamie, there's a lot of examples of Coach Bray and how he's really been someone over the years that I've learned a lot from in terms of his demeanor and how he, believes in his kids and the confidence in which he instills in them. And I truly believe this clip should be somewhere in amateur basketball where coaches of all levels can actually see what it's like to lose a very difficult game on the road where you blow a big lead up 17 in the first half, and as frustrated and as upset as you were, to still be able to maintain your poise and composure and show the confidence and belief in one of your players after, unfortunately, you don't get a shot off and the kid's visibly upset, speaks to who Coach Bray is and why his players love to play for him. In this clip, at Georgia Tech, Notre Dame last season was playing for their, probably playing for their tournament life. Uh, they were 4-6 in the league, and it was a game that they pretty much controlled throughout it. And as you can see in this last clip, last possession here, they have the ball, and Georgia Tech is defending, and Cormac Ryan for Notre Dame gets the ball in a position where, understanding time and score, he's probably going to shoot the ball. And unfortunately, the poor kid doesn't recognize it, and Notre Dame doesn't get a shot off. And there's visible frustration from players, coaches, fans. And at the same time, you watch Coach Bray as the head coach walk over to him, as when they finish, kind of congratulating Georgia Tech, and just look at him and slap him in the butt and say it's okay. And I think for all coaches over the years, when you get upset, which I do, I'm just as guilty as anybody, sometimes learning and watching how others deal with a tough loss like this, you can really take from it. And I've been to many high school games, as you have, Jamie, AAU games, and you see coaches get so upset. And as much as they're upset with the kid, it becomes a scene. And I think here you see Coach Bray and how professional he is, how it speaks to how these kids want to play for him night in and night out, is because when he doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low, and he maintains his belief and his confidence in his players. And I think this is a great clip that illustrates, what this is all about in terms of, the ups and downs of the game of basketball, and especially with the stakes, the high stakes that there are at our level or in college at the ACC level, and that a head coach and his staff and his teammates, can continue to keep it together and believe and show that they believe and they have confidence in their guys. And not to say this is going to happen every time, but the game after this, Notre Dame actually went to Duke, and Cormac Ryan, the same kid that was really frustrated and down, the same kid that Coach Bray went over to and slapped, it's okay, I believe in you type thing message. He actually scored 21 points in the first half at Duke, ended up with a career high 28, and helped Notre Dame win at Duke. So again, how you handle your players and how you deal with the wins and the losses does matter. And I think this is a great lesson for all coaches to learn from. And that is, as upset as we all are, as competitive as we all are, it is a game. These are kids. They are trying, and try to make sure that you let them know, whatever the outcome is, that, we appreciate their efforts, and at least give them the same approach, or at least cover it just like Coach Bray did here by encouraging him and letting him know that, it's okay.
Last season, Notre Dame finished 7-11 in the ACC. They returned 5 of their top 6 scores and 82% of their total scoring off of last season's team. The leading scorer, 6'3" senior point guard Prentice Hub, averaged 14.6 points per game. He also led the ACC in assists at 5.8 per game. How important is that to be getting your senior point guard back? And what can we expect from Prentice Hub this coming season for Notre Dame?
Well, Prentice Hub has become, arguably one of the premier point guards, in the ACC. He's been a kid that's played a ton of minutes since he's been there as a freshman. He's led them to some big wins over his time there. and he's going to be their leader. He's going to be the catalyst this year on a Notre Dame team that returns their top 5 3-point shooters from a year ago, and led by Prentice. Prentice, I believe, had 65 made 3-point field goals last year, and left-handed kid. The ball can be in his hands. He can play off the ball. Plays with great fire and competitive spirit on both ends of the floor. He's become almost an extension of Coach Bray in a lot of ways, meaning that there are times that Prentice could miss 3 or 4 in a row and not get too high or low, and there's times he could make 5 6 in a row with deep range and maintain his poise and composure. But to your point, Jamie, it all starts with Prentice Hub for this year's upcoming Notre Dame team.
The X factor for this team very well may be 6'10" senior Nate Lashevsky. He was one of the most improved players in the ACC last year. The 6'10" forward jumped from 7.4 points and 30% shooting from three up to 13.3 points on 43.4% shooting from three last season. Can we expect another step taken from Nate, and how big or how important is his role on this Notre Dame's team success this year?
Well, Nate Lashevsky, we saw him a lot in prep school. He was up here and watched him quite a bit. And he's again, a 6'10" forward who can play in and away from the basket. Tremendous skill set. His best attribute is his ability to knock down 3-point shots. And with this year's team, they could do a lot of different, play a lot of different combinations with him. They could play small ball and play him at the 5. They could play, big ball and play him at the 3 or 4 if they wanted to. But he's a kid that over his time at Notre Dame has gotten better and better. I think sometimes with Nate, you're trying to kind of keep everything in perspective, right? You see a kid with his skill set, with his size, and his understanding of the game. At some point, it's gonna all come together for him. He's shown flashes of being able to put up big numbers and to make consecutive threes from deep, and to do a lot of different things for their team, even in the post on the offensive glass. But this is the type of kid that is probably on the verge of a major breakout, where game in and game out, we could see a kid like this start putting up huge numbers, for this year's Notre Dame team.
Last season, Notre Dame finished second in conference play in 3 points attempted and 3-pointers made. They also dished out the second most assists in conference play, scored the second most points in conference play. Their offense does a great job moving, and they're creative with their spacing. Why don't you take us through their offensive identity and show us how Mike Bray consistently puts up such efficient offensive numbers?
Notre Dame, when it starts with Notre Dame, it starts with their transition and their spacing. They're the type of team, and I'll get into some clips here in a minute, but when you're preparing to play Notre Dame, you're really preparing to play a team that's been so well coached. Maybe a kind of a throwback team in terms of how Coach Bray has got his guys understanding how to play without the basketball. In this day and age with AAU ball, Jamie, as well as anybody, a lot of kids are so used to playing with the ball in their hands. And when you watch Notre Dame, they're playing and they're moving without the basketball. There's a lot of, exchanges on the strong side, weak side. There's a lot of cuts. And a lot of this is read and reaction. And what Coach Bray has done is he could run, the same quick hitters or the entries that he runs year in and year out. But it's not necessarily those entries. It's how his guys read and react, how the defense is playing, and that motion and movement, constant moving without the basketball, that really proposes problems for the opposition. And because of that, they can play inside out in a lot of ways. And when they do play with this type of great spacing and that they're going inside out, it opens up opportunities to get 3-point shots, wide open threes, by making that extra pass. And Coach Bray has done it, as well as anybody in this league, as it relates to teaching his guys to understand how to play. He recruits to that system, as we've talked about. And again, his guys are very, very savvy. They're a difficult team to match up with because of all the skill in each position that they present. With that, Jamie, I'd like to go through some offensive possessions here to kind of show a little bit more about Notre Dame and their attack as it relates to their offensive identity. First and foremost, as we spoke about, it starts with transition, and you'll see in this clip coming up here on a block shot how quickly they advance the ball up the floor. And one of the things with Notre Dame is they'll run their lane. So their first big will go rim run right to the front of the rim. As you can see, this is Gibbs with the ball. His head is up right away. So again, not looking to dribble the ball the length of the floor. He's looking to see who on his team is open, and if he can, looking to pitch ahead. In this case, it's a very, very good possession for Notre Dame, as when he's dribbling up, the fact that the five man is running towards the front of the rim, and the bottom defender in transition is going to have to pay attention. He's putting pressure on that bottom defender. You'll see the fact that that big guy ran right to the front of the rim, and then that cross court pass where Hub has his hands ready, hips down, and steps right into a rhythm 3-point shots. That's how it all starts with Notre Dame. They will get out in transition and they will look to run. And if there's an opportunity for a wide open shot, again, the belief that Coach Bray has instilled in his guys and the confidence, those are shots that for them are rhythm threes, and they'll make more often than not if they're open. This next possession here, you'll see a rebound, and this is Hub now with the ball. And again, that little pitch ahead where it's kind of cross court really is a hard guard for the defense in transition. Anytime you can change sides of the floor in transition with that type of pass, now the defense, transition defense, has to kind of react to being from strong side going to weak side. And it really, it puts a lot of pressure on them. And here in this pitch ahead, Prentice Hub, wide open, Wentz, step in, for a wide open 3-point shot. With that, when you're coming in to Notre Dame and understanding that they've got so many weapons behind the 3-point line, you've got to understand that when you're getting back on defense, and we've talked about the rules, protect the basket, stop the ball, and then find dangerous people before then you can engage the post. Finding dangerous people against Notre Dame is not very easy because they have so many guys that can make threes. This year's team, and we'll talk about personnel, they've got, their top 5 returning 3-point shooters, coming back. So there's a lot of offense out on the floor. Again, Notre Dame is not going to come into a game and try to trick you. But what they're going to do is they're going to run several different entries, but it's the fact that each one of these guys understands how to read and react to what the defense dictates. And so part of that's recruiting, again, recruiting the system fits that Coach Bray wants, guys who are skilled but also understand the game. They're savvy players. And the other part of that is, really understanding, I'm sure through a lot of drill work and video. In this possession, they run a little basic, what we call, pick the picker, screen the screener. And that action really doesn't get and trick anybody, right? But when the ball is entered, you're going to see Lasevsky, basket cut, taking his defender with him. That first cut, Lasevsky finishes, and then he spaces and he actually replaces himself right back out to that corner to the 3-point line. And now you have a second cutter, where now, Hub, who reads his defender, if you can see, has lost vision with him. He speed cuts to the rim, catches the ball, and then he feels all the defenders converging on him. So in traffic, he comes to a jump stop, and Lasevsky, who actually initially had basket cut, replaces himself out to that 3-point line. He's an excellent 3-point shooter, so you have to close. And then on the reversal, Gibbs with a great up fake, and then rhythm mid-range pull-up shot. Vintage Notre Dame as it relates to not necessarily exploiting you on the initial quick hitting action, but exploiting you on any type of mistake or any type of read reaction that the players feel like they can take advantage of. So very, very difficult to defend actions like these. This next clip here, happens to be against when I was at Boston College, is in a ball screen action. And in this ball screen action, you could see here as I rewind this, okay, you're going to see the two guys, going from on the weak side, exchanging. When they exchange, it causes confusion amongst our defenders. And so, what I mean by that is when the ball screen initially happens and he comes off, there's actually what we call a stack side. And the stack side is now, going, towards that side of the floor. And so, as the ball screen occurs, those two offensive players on Notre Dame just simply exchange. And as they exchange, it causes confusion amongst our guys at Boston College. And then again, a catch and an immediate, pass with Hub being, and the Notre Dame players are so well drilled at being shot ready, hands ready, hips down, and that the placement of the pass also by Goodwin, where he hits Hub right on his shooting pocket, where he doesn't have have to waste any time to kind of go get the ball and gather. It's just too much, for us to come from that, help side position and get there. So again, very, very, difficult to guard. Not the initial action; it was how the Notre Dame players were moving without the ball on the ball screen, and then the read and reaction on the catch and being shot ready. In this next clip, you're going to see this same similar type of action, except now the stack side started actually on the strong side. So you'll see the two offensive players on Notre Dame, Goodwin, and I believe that's Jogo, on the ball screen. You can see those two players not being stagnant; they're moving. So in this case, Goodwin, okay, is actually replacing, going from high to low, and Jogo is coming behind. And what happens is now on the ball screen, the coverage is actually punching over and, kind of showing flat. But because of that little motion and movement, without the ball by those two Notre Dame, players, offensive players, it takes away any type of weak side help defender and gives Lashesky an opportunity for an open dunk. In this next clip, you're going to see Notre Dame here, in what we would call a universal horn set, pretty popular NBA set where you have two bigs straddling the 3-point line and two guards in the corner. And what happens here is Notre Dame, again, there's eye contact made with Hub. And in this case, it's Durham, who's being guarded by Mark Williams. And what happens is the Duke defender is kind of already in position to kind of show on this, what we would call horns ball screen action. And so when, Durham feels, his defender kind of cheating the play. So instead of being like, in a ball you man situation, the Duke player is a little bit over aggressive here, Williams, and, kind of declaring that he's going to show here on this ball screen. And as soon as that happens and Hub picks the ball up, he plants that foot and he cuts, straight to the basket, and now he's got the Duke defender, on his hip, and he's got an opportunity just to make a play in the lane right on top of the basket. That play wasn't necessarily, again, the action. It was how the Notre Dame offensive player read his man, and because his man was cheating, he reacted that way. Read and reaction, very, very big. Again, skilled, savvy players is what Coach Bray has recruited, and they're very, very good at what they do. So with that, Jamie, I think if you think about Notre Dame and you're getting ready to play them and prepare for them, understanding that your defense has to be extremely disciplined every possession, all five guys. And at some point, during possessions, if one guy breaks down, or whether it's transition or whether it's in the half court, Notre Dame will exploit those breakdowns and they'll make you pay. And that's why Notre Dame has been so successful over the last several years under Coach Bray.
No doubt. And their success on the offensive end absolutely shows as to how they are tough to guard, as he's continued to have that type of success on that end of the floor. But he returns a ton of experienced firepower on the wings. 6'6" Dane Goodwin, 11.8 points per game last year. 6'5" senior Cormac Ryan, 9.9 points, 43 made threes. 6'5" senior Trey Wirtz, 8.3 points, 43% shooting from the 3-point line. Robbie Carmody comes back from Morris, Pennsylvania, former Pennsylvania Player of the Year. Um, what will the expectations be for this group um, as they have a stable full of guys who can all kind of dribble pass and really, really shoot?
Well, Jamie, this year's team, with what they have returning, to me, they're the sleeper team in the ACC. With all the roster turnover that a lot of the teams from last year, the upper echelon team ACC, lost. Notre Dame is one of those teams that really comes back with a lot of experience and veteran guys. And again, you add another year under Coach Bray and his staff's tutelage, and these kids are continuously reading and reacting to one another with great spacing and great individual, workout sessions. They've got a lot of weapons with experience, and that's kind of the formula, right? For an ACC team to try to climb to the top of this league, if you can get older, you get more experienced guys who are battle tested, and guys who are proven. These five guys that they have returning, not even mentioning Carmody. The poor kid's had a couple of tough years with injuries, and he was a kid that coming out of Pennsylvania was the number one ranked player out in the state. He's a very viable option, a really another good player that Notre Dame can utilize if the kid's healthy. So again, with those returners, core returners, with that amount of skill, that amount of 3-point firepower, Notre Dame is going to be a very difficult team this year to match up with. And to me, they're my sleeper team in the ACC this year.
We've mentioned all the returners they have who are coming back, the experience they have coming back on this team. Notre Dame also adds a big transfer, former Ivy League Player of the Year, Paul Atkinson. Now, the Ivy League didn't play last year, but 2 years ago, Atkinson averaged 17.6 points, 7.3 rebounds. He shot 63% from the field. How will he fit in to the minutes vacated by Juwan Durham?
Jim, you add a kid of his caliber, Ivy League Player of the Year. And when you think about that, you're thinking about, a league that is very underrated. There's a lot of exceptionally talented kids in the Ivy League. And last year with COVID, the whole league was on pause. So he didn't play last year. But having his experience and the success he's had individually, anytime you're putting up 18 points per game, again, in that league, also rebounding at a very high rate. A young man that is, skilled. He can, knock down 15 footers with great consistency. And with their individual instruction and Coach Bray's, drive to instill a lot of confidence, I'm sure he's going to be a kid too that will be allowed to shoot threes this year. I'm sure he's continually developed in the offseason. So adding him to an already loaded lineup of skill and savvy, and with experience, he's going to be a huge piece of what Notre Dame is going to be able to to use in that front court, especially with the loss of Durham. He's going to be a guy that's going to be, I think other teams are going to take notice, right off the bat.
We've talked at length so far in this podcast about how really good Notre Dame is executing on offense. I'm sure a question that some of the fans may have is about their defense. You've coached against Mike Bray. You've schemed against Mike Bray. Why don't you kind of break down a little bit their defensive identity and what they can expect, the fans can expect from a Mike Bray coach defense on this upcoming year?
As you mentioned, Jamie, we're going to touch on Notre Dame's defensive identity. And one of the things about Coach Bray and his staff and the Irish is that they actually have a multiple defensive package. And game to game, you really don't know what you're going to get. You're probably going to get the whole package at some point. However, just like any other defense, if one defense, particularly man or zone, is working, Coach Bray and his staff they'll stay with it. And in this clip here, you're going to see Notre Dame in a straight man-to-man defense as it looks coming over half court, and you'll see them switching a lot. Now, there are possessions that they'll switch 1 through 4, handoffs, ball screens, off the ball. And in this case, they're actually switching 1 through 5. And notice the communication here. And again, Florida State, who was a tremendous team year in and year out, very very talented. Notre Dame here is communicating all these switches and really confusing, Florida State in this possession. And you can see, fingertips. You can hear voices. Ultimate communication here. Big, small, small, big. It doesn't matter. And they force Florida State into a very, very difficult shot here. High hand contest. Everybody boxes out and their guards rebound. And it's those possessions like that, again, when you play against Notre Dame, you know, defensively, you could see a lot of different looks as it relates to man, whether it's straight man, switching 1 through 4, switching 1 through 5. And so you have to be prepared to face all of the above. And that leads me to my next point. Often as a coach in this profession, especially as an assistant, when it's your scout or when an assistant coach has a scout, he'll bring in the scout team. And during preparation for some of these games, depending upon how much time that you have, your scout team will learn the opposition's offenses. And in this case, they'll learn the defenses. So there's a segment of practice in preparation for that team that you're actually playing the defense, different defenses that you might see, in this next game. And so the scout team does have a lot of impact on winning and losing college, and I'm sure even at the NBA level, in terms of preparation. Here's another possession, that you see Notre Dame here. And this time here, they're in their 2-3 zone. Again, just a very straight, kind of straight up 2-3, no real wrinkles to it. You'll see on the ball is reversed here. You'll see Lasevsky, the corner guy, kind of step up with his butt to the baseline and his arms out. And what he's trying to do is to prevent number 4 here for Wake Forest from passing it to that what we call strong side corner or to that step out area. So it's what we call, step up and bump. And what the bottom guy does here, Krzyzewski, is he bumps back. The guard actually takes it the top of the 2-3, and they continue on. They keep their shape. You see Hub's fingertip pointing. That communication is huge defensively, whether you're in man or whether you're in zone. And you can see Cormac Ryan here stepping up. And at times, he might not even know there's a cutter behind him. But it's up to Hub and even Durham here, the 5-man in the middle, to let him know that if there is a cutter, he doesn't have high eyes behind his head to talk to him, and he trusts his teammate. Trusting your teammates defensively matters a great deal also. So here's what we call the bump back, takes it away. Hub then takes the ball. They keep their shape in their 2-3 zone. And, it's something that, again, you will see different defenses against Notre Dame. They force him into a tough shot. Durham contest it, rebound. So that's their straight, 2-3. There's also possessions that they'll go back in their package and, they'll take the shape of a 2-3 zone here. And as soon as the ball gets to the elbow, the high post area, we call that the high post, anything near the free throw line or the elbows, the 5-man then, or the middle man in the zone, whoever that may be, in this case it's Durham, will take the ball. Everybody else matches up to the closest man to him. Again, Notre Dame, as well drilled, well coached as they are, you can see number 23 Goodwin pointing to the bottom forward on his side. And in this case, it's the Notre Dame number 13 Jogo who has to recognize that. In this case here, they match up and they go man to man, and it causes a little confusion. So Notre Dame will mix up whether they're playing man straight, whether they're switching, whether they're playing 2-3 zone straight up, whether they play 2-3 zone and go to man. There's a lot of different things to prepare for, against them. So in this next clip, you'll see Notre Dame take the shape of a 1-3-1. The hardest part of this defense against a team like Notre Dame, and they'll probably do this year, especially with their experience and their returners, number 14 Lasevsky, who's 6'10" with a 7-foot plus wingspan. It's really hard to reverse the ball. As a coach, you're telling the offense, to make sure you get reversal against the zone. So the zone has to move. And it is very difficult in this case to get the pass either over the top of Leshevsky or on a bounce pass because he applies such great pressure. You can see the Notre Dame players for the most part, especially their middleman and Leshevsky, and even that wing, I believe that to be Hub, to have their arms out where they're closing passing lanes and looking for deflections, not to give any type of direct line passes. So in this possession here, you'll see it's hard to make that pass. And by the time they do, they make the player here on offense step out behind the line of the ball, where now it's not really an attacking pass. And so it gives the time, the defense time in the zone to rotate and shift. And so again, you can see Leshevsky up top, great pressure. You can see how active they are in it. Corner guy Goodwin here closing out. He has corners. He takes a dribble. He bumps back to the wing now. It's Hub. Probably here, it's a little bit late, but again, it's a contest. But as you can see, Notre Dame is so well coached. They're so well drilled that any of the above defenses, and there's more. I mean, there's a lot more that they actually do. These are just a few examples of how you have to be prepared against Notre Dame.
This season, Bray brings in a two-man recruiting class. Uniquely enough, both rivals' 150 players came from South Bend, Indiana, so he didn't have to go far to bring in the class. The number 103 ranked player, Blake Wesley, chose Notre Dame over the likes of Purdue, Xavier, Maryland, Kansas State. And J.R. Konechki was ranked number 127 by Rivals.com. The 6'7" wing chose Notre Dame over the likes of Iowa, Creighton, Butler, Maryland. What type of stuff, what type of games, Scott, I know that you've dug deep into what they're doing. What type of games do they have, and what can we expect from this duo this season?
Well, Wesley is somebody that I think is, Blake Wesley, from South Bend right there, is a kid that brings a lot of athleticism to their lineup. He's the young man that is long, he's athletic, he's versatile, and he's got a tremendous first step. I mean, he really can get into the paint with a great feel for the game also. So when you take him and add him to what they have returning, he brings a whole nother dimension. Notre Dame likes to do, as we've talked about on the defensive side, they do a lot of switching at times. And so he's one of those guys that's versatile enough to guard multiple positions, very athletic. And again, of all the guys returning, he as a newcomer might be the best guy in terms of splashing and getting into the paint for them. He has the ability to score at different levels, but I think his best attribute right now is his versatility and his ability to get in the paint and slash. The other young man, I got to make sure Konechny, excuse me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. Konechny is another young man from South Bend, Indiana, who is an excellent three-point shooter. Another young man who fills what Coach Bray, has recruited, and that is, he kind of is that guy that can pass, dribble, and shoot with a high basketball IQ. Offers more versatility once again at 6'7", can play multiple positions. He understands how to play the game, so he'll fit in very nicely. Again, we call that a system fit. Great system fit for them. He will add this year depth and another weapon from the three-point line that Coach Bray has at his disposal in an already loaded three-point line offensive attack in terms of those five guys returning. So both guys will contribute, I believe, a lot this year, and especially with the experience they have returning. These will be great, complementary guys, and who knows, as we've seen over time and time again, some of these freshmen come in there, they're further ahead than you think, and they come in and beat other guys out.
That wraps it up here for this Notre Dame edition of The Breakdown. I am Jamie Shaw, my co-host Scott Spinelli. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Go back to previous podcasts that we've had. Duke was session 2. Virginia was session 1. Make sure you click on those. And we want to hear in the comments below from you. What do you think of Notre Dame, this team? What do you think of their personnel? What do you think of the X's and O's? Tell us your thoughts on what Notre Dame is going to do this upcoming season. Spinelli said that he was going to be their sleeper team in the ACC. We want to know what you think. Make sure you rate us 5 stars. Make sure you subscribe to whatever you're listening to us on, whether it be YouTube, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you consume your content. Please make sure you subscribe, rate us 5 stars, leave the comment below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. For Coach Scott Spinelli, I'm Jamie Shaw. We'll see you next time.